Good morning and welcome to Rising. Robby, it's a profoundly important show today. Am I wrong?
Consequential show.
Consequential
Weighty.
show.
Serious. Shrita Parsi is here to weigh in on the ongoing nuclear deal talks with Iran, and Oleksiy Semeniy and Rachel Bovard will join us to discuss New York Mayor Eric Adams' new crackdown on homelessness in the city.
But first, focus on Ukraine. This morning, we've learned Germany will halt the authorization of the major gas pipeline Nord Stream 2 over Russia's actions in Ukraine. Without Germany's approval, natural gas cannot flow through the Baltic Sea pipeline from Russia to Germany. This could have major consequences for European energy security and suggests Western sanctions against Moscow will be tough. This comes as Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the troops into two breakaway regions of eastern Ukraine, announcing Monday evening that he would recognize their independence. There's been fighting in the regions between pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian separatists.
The recognition of Luhansk and Donetsk as independence could provide an in on having Russian troops cross the border into those areas. Putin blamed NATO for the current crisis and called the U.S.-led alliance an existential threat to Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky responded to the situation saying, quote, "We are committed to the peaceful and diplomatic path, and we will follow it and only it." But he said that Ukraine would not concede his country's land. "We are on our own land. We will not be afraid of anything and anybody. We owe nothing to no one and will give nothing to no one."
According to Reuters, the president also accused Moscow of violating Ukraine's sovereign territory and called for an emergency meeting of the leaders from Ukraine, Russia, Germany, and France, as well as support from Ukraine's allies. So, director of the Institute for Global Transformations in Kiev, Dr. Oleksiy Semeniy, is here to discuss. Welcome, Dr. Semeniy.
Welcome, Robby and Ryan.
And so, can you tell us what is the situation on the ground as we speak?
I would say more or less the situation is calm, not only in the capital where I'm here now, but throughout Ukraine, except the regions on the contact line. But the only one important issue which you would probably emphasize or miss is actually the question, yes, the recognition came from Russia, but the very important issue, which territories they recognize. Namely, the territory that these separatist republics already control, or as according to their so-called in brackets constitutions, the territory both of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. Because now, if we take Donetsk and Lugansk regions, these separatists, they have under their control approximately 40% of the territory. But the other side is actually normal Ukraine. And now it's up to Kremlin, actually, which territory did they recognize? De facto controlled, or having a little bit more, and thus the first option would be, I would say, deep freezing of the whole conflict, which could be quite a positive. The second option would create a huge tensions, even more than we had before.
Right. Well, world leaders are condemning Russia after the forces were deployed. They voiced support for Ukraine, along with worries about how a European war could hurt global and local economies. UK PM Boris Johnson called the invasion a breach of international law and a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine.
And war would wreak huge economic damage across Europe, which is heavily dependent on Russian energy. And the ongoing tensions are already driving up oil prices. According to the Wall Street Journal, oil, natural gas, and agriculture prices rose as the future of Ukraine threatens to disrupt the flow of natural resources from Eastern Europe to world markets. And Oleksiy, I want to pick up on what you were talking about. So, in other words, right now, Russia effectively de facto controls, you said, about 40% of these two regions. And so if it does appear that Putin's ambitions are greater than that, he would suggest that he was looking towards annexing all of those regions, even the parts still controlled by Ukraine. But if it winds up with Russian control over those de facto controlled regions, how would Ukrainians in the end feel about that? I would imagine that they can't say now that they would be okay with that. But would the Ukrainian public see that as the least bad way out of this crisis?
I would say in general, of course, the emotions are quite negative, although the people had been more or less for the last 8-7 years accommodated to this de facto line, frozen line of contact, and actually in comparison with the vast majority of such conflicts all over the world, where the line is absolutely just the line and nobody crosses the line and all the tides have been reached, this line was quite unique because each year approximately I would say 1 million of people cross the line in both directions, which actually made it possible to have this reconnection and deoccupation and reintegration. This was exactly unique. I don't know how it will go further now of this recognition in brackets from Russia, but now it will be problematic, and the major issue will be exactly about the ambitions of Mr. Putin, because the escalation or further escalation would mean, first of all, more sanctions from West, then a quite tough reaction from Ukraine and actually increase of fire, which we had already increased for the last week, and then quite dramatic perspective of this actually direct clash between some Russian and Ukrainian military units. Whether it will be some kind of success for Russia, I doubt, because except of air, and if they would like to take other 60% of that regions, that would mean they need the boot on the ground. And the previous statistics of this conflict sign that approximately losses from the both sides were the Russians on the level of officers, for example, for all artillery, tanks, and some other quite sophisticated equipment, there was exclusively Russian officers, not the locals. And statistics showed that the losses from Russian side was approximately 1 to 1.2 in the favor of Ukraine. So if you would like, I mean Putin, to conquer more, then you should count immediately with thousands of deaths and 10,000s of wounds from Russian side. Whether this toll will be acceptable for Russia, I doubt. Now, actually, for Russian public, I would say maybe they did some kind of sociological polls and decided that the recognition would be actually the safe facing model for them, because the aggression are still not supported by the majority of Russians against Ukraine. So this decision could be. But once more, actually the normal option would be to deep freeze, although in his speech for 1 hour yesterday, Putin in the first half actually made quite a strong accusations against Ukraine and Ukrainian statehood as a whole, which is actually direct threat to Ukraine in general. Beforehand, it was more like historical elaborations, but the yesterday's speech was exactly just political, some kind of assault and sign, guys, we don't accept you as a Ukrainian state, despite all our emotions. So if it's like this, and he was quite emotional, which is quite a negative sign, because Putin publicly is very rarely emotional. Yesterday he was emotional. And if he goes like this, then everybody, not only Ukraine, everybody in Europe is in a huge trouble.
Well, what about the Nord Stream shutdown? Maybe that, in addition to the potential casualties, the coming, Western sanctions. Would all that, be enough for him to say, okay, this is good enough? These disputed regions, that will be it.
I suppose it was quite a logical step from Germany from 2 points of view. The issue was already some kind of red spot and quite contested one, and blamed from many of the sides towards the Germany, why you are doing this project further. And the second one, after personally Mr. Scholz and Germany, aligned with France, made a number of visits for the last 3 weeks, extraordinary number of visits, both to Moscow and to Kiev, to get what Putin done yesterday, it was just a public offense, personally to Scholz and to Germany. And Germany needed just to react. And now the minor reaction is to put on hold Nord Stream 2, to make a clear sign, if any further step, we close fully the project. And to have this readiness, which was not actually mentioned by Scholz when he was in Moscow. In Moscow, just it was a direct question in the press conference, and Scholz actually avoided the direct answer to have diplomatic formula. Now the Germans are much more clear, and this is negative sign for Russians.
How credible is the threat from Germany? As we're getting closer to spring, will there be, the fear was that Putin would basically have Germany over a barrel, that Germany would have no choice but to, continue to do Russia's bidding. But is that no longer the case?
I could emphasize that we are not talking about Nord Stream 2, which is actually the copy of Nord Stream 1. Nord Stream 1 already submits per year 55 BCM per year. Mm-hmm. And if it goes like this, increasing the stakes, and which is actually some ideas from the DC has come into Berlin, actually the next threat will be to close Nord Stream 1. That would mean automatically that actually Russia, having commitments to Western contracts, needs some capacities to transit the gas volumes. Because if 55 BCM is out, you need some other capacities. That would mean once more to using Ukrainian route. And if using Ukrainian route, you cannot have a war with Ukraine because it's just unlogical. So now actually on the Western side, there is a potential to increase the stakes, but it's like calibrated game now started. But for me, it's a little bit unfavorable as Ukrainian because we are here in the center, that the stakes are increasing with each day, but I understand the logic. The step was from Russia. Now we're expecting actually the step from the West. And this is about actually credibility and very important. It's not only about Ukrainians who are now a lot of emotions and you can understand why, but in the whole Europeans, where now the majority starts to feel this situation as unsafe for them. It was not for 30 years for the last. And very important, and for US it's extremely important, it's about China. China is now very thoroughly looking the situation, namely US reaction, and calibrating to what extent US is capable actually to have the number one, to have the face, to push back Russians, because if not, you automatically will get a lot of trouble from China on the other side of the world.
Yeah, what should the U.S. be doing and saying at this point? We've been kind of critical of the Biden administration, of the media, for kind of encouraging a very aggressive verbal posturing. I think you said last time we had you on that there was the potential that could escalate things toward war. Now that we're in the situation we're in, where it looks like troops are coming, or maybe there's something we could do. What should the U.S.'s stance be? How should Biden? What should he say if the goal is still to de-escalate, which I think it should be?
I would say much more emphasis should be devoted not to what Biden could or should say, but what he should do. Okay, by saying actually de facto now the emphasis should be, okay, if recognized, firstly, on the international level, we input some kind of sanctions plus absolute rejecting this in brackets recognition, but de facto line, and they have the channels with Russian, will be, okay, we freeze deeply along the whole line, and nobody goes in any direction, so we de-escalate fully the situation. Okay, de facto we accept that you control these territories, but we don't accept this, but we accept just the fact. But on the level of this, what is needed? And there are some mixed signals. On the one way, the US increased its military assistance and many actions in this way for Ukraine for the last half of the year, which is from current point of view positive, which irritated Russians a lot and still irritates. But on the other way, there are signals when, for example, evacuating fully the embassy first from Kiev and now evacuated from Lviv to Warsaw. This is very negative signal. This is just a huge blow for the image of US in Ukraine, which is now occurring, which is very negative. I don't know the pretext why it was done. Maybe there are good reasons for this, starting from security, and because some of the embassies and ambassadors, which I met, for example, 2 days before, Western ambassadors, are still here in Kiev. And then the very serious question, if these ambassadors are here in Kiev and US guys are in Lviv and then in Warsaw or in Poland, what the hell is going? So you need concrete deeds to underpin your serious actually policy towards the whole region. First of all, the emphasis de-escalate on the line, and then quite a serious, maybe some proclamation, making connotation to West Germany after the split. Okay, then we will build on the basis of Ukraine successful model of Eastern European democracy. and this state will not only survive, will flourish. And in 10, 20 years, you will see evidently the difference, not only with these break-up territories and Crimea, but with the whole Russia. This could be a very strong message, if underpinned by concrete actions, provided some urgent, to some extent it was, but it needed more. Financial assistance, starting some programs, making flagship investments into Ukraine from US. If you made, the other Western countries and globally, they will follow. Because after US, you can follow, otherwise not. Mm-hmm. That would be actually a very strong counterstrike against Russians.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. Oleksiy, thanks so much for joining us again. Be safe.
Yeah, okay. Be safe as well.
All right, we'll tell you what's on our radars up next.